The great masses without faith are unconscious of the destructive processes going on because they have lost the vision of the heights from which they have fallen. Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. As a fallen race, suffering amnesia of the utopia we once called home, it is incomprehensible to most that our world could function without death. Looking around at our current reality, it seems like death is a given. After all, death is everywhere. And since death and life seem to cycle around each other, death, life, it's logical to assume that death and life are inseparable, as if necessary to each other. This assumption about the necessity of death so often becomes a justification for bloodshed. But the commonplaceness of death is not proof of the necessity of death. Rather, the widespread acceptance of death as a given or necessity is evidence of our fall from Eden. Bloodthirst is a symptom of being spiritually dead. Bloodthirst is indicative of unconsciousness, which is a fallen state of being. Like zombies bitten by an undead carrier of the death virus, we too wander mindlessly in search of another living being we can drag down into the land of the dead. Like vampires, we suck the life force from others in the hopes that we will not die too soon. That is, until somebody living has the grace and mercy to wake us up from our sleepwalking state. Somebody like Jesus the Christ. But in order to understand why the eternal life promised to us by Jesus the Christ is worthwhile, we must first acknowledge that we've been infected by death. 1. Nature as we currently experience it isn't necessarily all there is or all there ever has been. And 2, we know what is possible based on what we're able to conceive of in our imaginations. So, it is quite revelatory that humanity is indeed able to conceive of a deathless utopian dimension of nature, as evidenced by these Bible verses. Genesis 1:29, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." As explained in a previous sermon, fruits, seeds, and nuts are among the only foods that humans can eat that don't need to die to be eaten. It's deathless food, essentially. The first animal killing didn't happen until after the fall. And remember how the first responsibility God gave humans after creating them was to steward the animals? To steward something is to optimize its potential. The implication, therefore, is that their evolutionary potential depends on ours. So what if, when we fell from Eden, our loss of potential automatically reduced the animal's potential, as though reality truly is anthropocentric and our fall automatically became their fall too? Meaning, when we fell, nature fell. Then there's this imagining of a predatorless future later on in Isaiah. Isaiah 11:6-9, "The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together. And the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." Did you clock that? The knowledge of the Lord. When the earth is filled with the knowledge of the Lord, there is no destruction. There is no death. Notice how the onus is on the predator to stop being a predator in this passage. So it's the wolf who must be peaceful towards the lamb. It's the leopard who must refrain from attacking the goat, the bear who must learn to eat grass like the cow, and the lion who learns to eat straw like the ox. Too often in the pop occult world, Self-worshiping gurus tell us to embrace our dark side, make peace with our shadow, own the predator within ourselves, and so on. This, they tell us, is how to become a master of the earthly plane, a sociopath who has accepted that there is no good and evil, it's all relative, it's all the same, and therefore they are comfortable living lavishly at the expense of others. Now, to that point, I will elaborate on how it can be possible to live abundantly, not at the expense of others, in future sermons on free energy coming soon. I find these Old Testament verses about peace and no killing on earth even more interesting when considered side by side with this New Testament one where Jesus says in Mark 16:15, "And he said to them, 'Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.'" Jesus first embodied physical immortality to prove it can happen, and then he sent his disciples forward to tell every creature about it, promising that if they believe, they'll be saved from death, I presume. To accept that Jesus did indeed come back from the dead, and that, per his promise, we would do greater works than he did, greater works than a resurrection, is to defy every cultural ordinance that insists upon death's necessity. So could it be that the instinctual aversion to death that all living creatures have is indicative of a subconscious collective awareness that a world without death is indeed possible? Could it be that all of creation wants to be redeemed, brought back to the utopian state of being we all once enjoyed in Eden, per the way that Jesus embodied? If so, we must tell them, all of the creatures, utopia is nigh, and we must forfeit our own parasitic, vampiric bloodthirst, like the predators mentioned in Isaiah 11:6-9. If we wish to experience the heaven here and now that Jesus spoke of, then we must forfeit our belief in scarcity. We must forfeit the every man for himself mentality. We must forfeit faith in limits. God has no limits. To put one's faith in limits is to take one's faith away from God. We must understand that the fallen version of nature that we currently experience is one we voluntarily opted into. And in order to opt out of it and be worthy of an Edenic state once again, we must embody the perfection, abundance, and free energy that is attuned to God's nature and will for us.